Hey guys, it's Ethan from Zimmer Labs, and this is going to be a video on this budget build that I just finished up for Jordan. It's a KR Saber's flagship hilt. Jordan sent it to me along with most of the parts and asked me to do a budget-wise conservative build using all the parts and doing a crystal chamber. So that's where we went with it, and let's jump into it. I'm pretty happy with it, I have to say, and I'm pretty impressed with it too. This is not a hilt that I've actually personally ever been a big fan of, but that's until I had actually had it in hand. And I have to say that it's really nicely done. It looks like it's cast out of brass and then polished. I don't think it's machined, although obviously some parts are, but it's really nicely done. Like, the threads are super clean. They work really nicely. No lubrication required. They're not going to cross thread on their own. All the edges on things look nice and sharp, but they are rounded just a touch so that everything is nice and safe and smooth. Just, you know, thoroughly from top to bottom a nicely manufactured hilt. The weight is nice. It's probably weighing in at about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds, so it's not light, but it's not too heavy, and it's got a nice balance to it. It's just about perfect right down the middle. It's also nice because it's, you know, fully brass. The only not brass is these 2 or 4, I guess, screws that hold the wings up on the top. As far as the finish goes, I didn't do any work really to the finish, except for just cleaning it up and making sure everything was, you know, consistent. The acid etching was something that was already there when I received it from Jordan, and it's a nice job on the acid etching. As you can see, it's obviously a nice job. I'm not sure who did it, but definitely well done on that. Let's see. The only thing as far as the exterior goes that I really did was this main button. I did a 1-button build for this because it's a budget build, and having a second button adds a fair amount of labor. But I wanted to make it consistent with the lightsaber, so I wanted it to be all brass. So I made a mechanical brass button, which, as you can see, has nice action, and aesthetically it just looks good, you know. It's a nice flat hand machined brass screw with a Phillips, or flathead screw, and with the line matching up with the line going around the hilt, so it fits in nicely and it looks good. And this little bezel that goes around it looks nice, so the whole thing is nice and consistent. The reason I opted for a mechanical button here instead of an electric button or a momentary switch is because I wanted it to be a removable chassis, and the only way to do that is to make a mechanical button, because the button has to come out in order to get the chassis out. So let's show you guys. Well, first off, pommel and screws, and your speaker's hanging out right there. I did a 24mm premium bass speaker on it. The hilt also splits at the center, and we've got a Goth 3 Designs master chassis done in 3D printed black plastic with brass inserts and some aluminum piping. And as you can see, it's a removable battery. So we've got a button cell 18650 that just pops right in there. Main kill switch is down here. Crystal chamber hanging out right here. And the Proffie board that runs everything is underneath this cover. Now, to get access to the Proffie board, all you have to do is, there are 2 anchor points, right here and right here. And to gain access, to remove the cover, you just kind of slide this anchor point up a tiny bit. Just enough so that the cover comes off. You don't want to take it all the way out, because then the little brass anchor will fall out. You have to put it back in. I just put a little bit of electrical tape over the Proffie board just to protect it in case it would touch the brass cover. You don't want to have anything grounding out. But the anchor points are right here, so you got these two little brass nubs that stick up, and they go in holes on the cover, and then there are matching holes on the other end that catch this little horseshoe-shaped brass rod here. You just kind of slide that back down, and then it locks the cover back in place. Nicely illuminated crystal chamber. This is a turbine style with a kind of a brass bullet center blade plug up top. Nicely illuminated. Let's just unscrew this set screw right here to remove the blade plug and or the blade. Shake it out to slide it out. It's a very simple blade plug, just hollow, diffused with sandpaper, and your standard razor turbine. Inside, a stock Custom Works Neopixel, onboard Neopixel connector with a custom diffused plexiglass screen. And then to remove the chassis, there's a set screw right here. You just want to loosen that up a few turns, and then unscrew the mechanical switch, and you can actually do it with your fingers, I think. Just want to get it started. Yeah, if you get it started with the screwdriver, then you can unscrew it with your fingers. There's your main button right there. Like I said, it's just a brass screw with a bezel. The bezel just comes right out. And once you remove those two parts, you can then twist and wiggle down, and fully removable modular chassis. Oops. Nice and bright all around. As you guys can see, I opted for the long pogo pins on this guy just to give it that extra spring, that extra distance of spring contact to make sure that the blade connection is extra stable. And in order to make everything fit, this chassis, when you order it, ends right here, right? So here's the only thing that was really a lot of, not even a lot of work, but just kind of a fair amount of work and kind of, you know, thought that had to go in and customization that had to go in to make everything work. When I got this hilt, it was slightly different in that the threads in the middle section here were much longer. Right now I've cut them down to about 1/4 of an inch, and there's 6 threads. When I received it, And as you get it from KR, this is twice as long. It's about a 12 thread section. It's about a ½ inch. And that means that when your chassis is inserted, your crystal chamber is basically covered. Like, there's this much more threaded section here, so you can't even see the crystal chamber. So in order to make this work, you have to shorten this section. So take out your trusty hacksaw or a bandsaw or whatever it is you use and carve off a good, 1/4 of an inch, half of these threads, because 6 threads is still more than enough to make it a stable hilt when you screw these guys on. So that's the first major change that I had to make. Then, in order to make this removable, you have to have everything attached to the chassis, which means you can't have the blade connection be mounted up in the front end of the hilt. That means you either have wires or you have to have a connector inside here. And considering that this chassis is an inch wide and there's this thin neck section in here, that means you have to do some sort of custom, modification to the chassis. So what I did is I opted to use just a section of aluminum stock that I had, drilled it out, hollowed it out, and mounted it to the top, so it acts as, a chassis extension, which allows the blade connector to be up and inside the emitter where it needs to be. So that's why it looks the way it does. It's a little different looking. I mean, I don't think it looks bad, but it's definitely a little different looking having this kind of thin metal top bit going on here, but that's the reasoning. It has to be kind of an extension to fit through this little neck area and get the blade connector where it needs to be. And then the set screw back here, I added for stability's sake, because if you only have the mechanical switch as your main connection to connect the chassis and the hilt together, that puts a little bit too much, pressure and stress on the button itself, and it does tend to get a little bit loose and slide around, and the button stops working because things aren't aligned correctly. So adding a little extra set screw right here is all you need to do to give it a bit more structural stability, firm up the connection between these two so that the button is no longer, dealing with all of the pressure and strain of holding the chassis in place, which means the button is more likely to stay in exactly the same place it is now, and therefore more likely to continue to work. So to reassemble, you just pop that bezel back on and then carefully screw in the brass, the flathead brass screw. And you just want to make sure you get it. You got to start it just right. If you start it crooked, then it's going to cross thread. So you want to just make sure when you rescrew this in there, you get it just right so that it's threaded in correctly, not at an angle screw, because it is a little bit hard to grab. I'll screw it so that it's lined up with the hilt itself. And as you guys can see, or hear, I suppose, it's a nice loud lightsaber. Now let's put in the blade real quick so I can run through the blade presets. So Jordan, you can get an idea of how I programmed it. It is a 1-inch emitter, so that's a 1-inch adapter on a 7/8 inch Neopixel blade. I'm going to go ahead and reset this guy so that we're at our first blade preset. And I have to unscrew the middle, not the bottom. Now excuse the fact that the bottom of this blade isn't lighting up. This is not actually Jordan's blade, it's just a shop blade. And the Neopixels in this blade start around here. And that's why we see this inch area that's not illuminated, but that's okay because this is not a blade for him. But as you can see, the first blade is a nice traditional Kit Fisto green. This is a more pale green, like a Force Effects green.
I feel the conflict within you, let go of your hate. I feel the conflict within you, let go of your hate.
There we go, color wheel.
I'll never turn to the dark side. I feel the conflict within you, let go of your conflict within you, let go of your hate.
So the color wheel on a single button saber, you just press and hold. No, that's not true. Press and hold, then release. But not quite as longer than you would if you're doing a force quote.
I'll never turn to the dark side. I'll never turn to the dark side. I'll never turn to the dark side.
Okay, I
feel
totally
the
understand, Luke.
Let go of your hate. I feel the conflict. Let go of your hate. This is not going to go the way you think.
Alright, so the initial color wheel turning on a single button saber is like a 2-second long press, and then when the color wheel is on to turn it off, it's just a long press, no release.
I'll never turn to the dark side. This is not going to go the way you think.
So now the color wheel's on. And that's off. Next blade up. This is a lime green. The fifth blade, cyan. And then we got a cool white. Yellow-white audio flicker. Nice purple, nice windy color. It's a green drawing blade. A green and white fire blade. And this sound font is called Spitfire, one of my favorites for Jedi fire blades. Standard red fire blade with K-Sith's crossguard. POV blade. And back to the beginning. Now every blade has force quotes associated with it as well as audio tracks associated with it. To get an audio track, you just do a 1.5 long press with the blade off. Actually no, that's how you toggle the blade. Maybe 2.5 second. I forget. How do we get the audio track? I'll tell you. So you do a long press and tap the hilt. And to stop it, the same. Toggle to the next blade. I just love this song. Sorry. So that's how that works. The only thing really we didn't get to see much of is the crystal chamber. So let's run through a little of that because it is actually a very pretty crystal chamber. And you can leave the hilt assembled but slid apart somewhat so you get a nice presentation. Like that's great for displaying right there. Take the blade out and just display it like so. backside, you get a little bit of shine through in this brass mesh area. Really nicely illuminated. Obviously double illuminated with pixels on both ends. Love the crystal chamber with the fire blade. That's a really good look. As far as the battery goes, we've got removable 18650 Molicel M35A. So 3500 milliamp hour, 10 to 15 amp current draw battery, which is an excellent battery as far as 18650 batteries go. You can't really do better than that. Main power switch, always remember to turn off when you're not in use so you don't drain the battery. USB and SD are underneath the plate down here on the bottom. And that's about it. So Jordan, let me know what you think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.